Welcome to Be a Baller podcast, where we discuss how to build a lifelong legacy. I'm your host, Coach Tim Brown. Today, I'm excited to have on the show with me Dr. Frederic Bertley. Dr. Bertley is an immunologist and science educator. He is currently the president of CEO, which is the Center of Science and Industry, the Science Museum in Columbus, Ohio. Prior to COSI, Dr. Bertley worked as Senior Vice President for Science and Education at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Dr. B is also an award-winning host of an animated YouTube show, Dr. B in 3, and a television show, QED with Dr. B.
Here's some cool science from COSI, an official science partner of our Columbus Blue Jackets. Physicist Isaac Newton would have loved hockey. Why? Because it clearly proves his third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Who knew? Well, Isaac Newton did. I'm a huge fan of hockey, and all this time, it was Newtonian physics at work. Want more science in your life? Visit cosi.org.
Today on the show, Dr. B will share his love for science and his commitment to inspiring young learners to be curious about the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. Dr. Bertley, welcome to Be a Baller podcast.
Coach Brown, thank you so much for inviting me to participate on your incredible podcast series. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. I had a question for you. I knew you grew up in Canada. Now, did you always have a love of science?
That's a funny story. So a little more background before the love of science. So my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from Trinidad. My mom's from Barbados. And they met in Montreal and then had 4 kids. And I like to say I'm the Oops Baby's younger brother.
Okay.
So the brother above me, he was the Oops Baby. I was the Oops. My mother was mid-40s when I came out. Definitely not planned. But grew up in Canada. And so I was an outdoorsy kid. I was not a schooly kid. I liked to play hockey, soccer, basketball, baseball, football, skateboard when that came in, even BMXing and skiing. Like I was just an outdoors kid. But I had a paper route. And being the son of West Indian children, West Indian parents, even though the paper was my paper route and I'd collect my little $5 a week or whatever it was, that wasn't my money. That needed to go into my bank account. I was not allowed to spend it. They were like, you save your money, put it in the bank. I was like, all right. And then when I was 10 years old, Coach Brown, I don't know, I'm dating myself, but one of the first handheld video games came out. You might remember it's called Coleco head-to-head football. They had head-to-head football and head-to-head baseball. Right. And I wanted to get this game. My friends had it down the street. They had it. My parents were like, no, you can't buy it. Save your money. Finally, I just begged them. Finally, they let me buy it. And so I bought it. And back then, these handheld games weren't energy efficient. It took those square batteries, those 9-volt batteries. You know the ones, I'm sure you did this, Coach Brown. You stick out your tongue. And you zap your tongue to feel that little sting, to see the batteries. Right. Yeah, and I see you laughing. That's exactly right. So it took those batteries, but it would chew through those batteries real quick, and I couldn't afford to get new batteries. And so I did what I thought was a smart idea at the time. I went down to our basement. We had an old lamp that wasn't in use, and I cut off the cable of the lamp, the part you plug in the wall, and I opened up the back of the game. I ripped off that little snap cap that snaps on that 9-volt battery. Mm-hmm. It's a red and black wire. I attached it to the lamp cord, and Coach Brown, true story, I remember it like it was today. I plugged it into the wall, worked best 10 seconds of my life. All right. By the 11th second, though, there was a char and spark at the outlet. My beautiful game that my parents let me buy my money actually got charred and fried. So I ruined my game and I was bummed. But I remember thinking despite being bummed, I remember thinking that, wow, this electricity stuff that as a kid, I just been taking for granted that you flick on a switch and the lights come on, or you plug something in the wall and it works. I was like, there's something really interesting behind the walls. It literally and metaphorically sparked my curiosity. And that's what got me hooked on science and the natural universe. I then began to be obsessed with, why does this work? Why is the grass green? Why are ladybugs this way? Why does a caterpillar have so many legs? Why? And I became that annoying kid that was always asking the adults in the room, why? But that got me hooked on understanding kind of just nature and the natural universe. And that's what got me hooked in science. So I didn't shoot out being a scientist or a scientifically inclined kid. I was a sports kid. But when I destroyed my cherished video game, that's when, okay, there's something cool here going on.
There's a story about your dad's reaction to that moment.
Oh, there is. Okay. So he comes running down the stairs. Now, he's from Trinidad, but he'd lived in Canada at this point like 30 years or something. He only had a West Indian accent when he wanted to have one. And he comes running down the stairs and like, son, what are you doing? You're trying to burn down the house. And I'm like, no. But after that, I mean, what's really cool about my parents is, even though he definitely was a little irritated at that, overall, they were just so supportive. And now they had this weird, wacky kid that was interested in science, and they supported me in whatever way I wanted to move forward. So, but yeah, that was a funny parent experience for sure.
Yeah. Were you always a science fair champion? Were you the champion of science fairs?
So that's a funny story. So in Canada, in the US, science fairs are a big deal. Yeah. In Canada, now they are a big deal. When I was growing up, it mattered on what school you went to. So if you didn't go to a school that did them, you didn't do them. So I, believe it or not, I've never, ever participated myself as a student in a science fair. Never. I got into science fairs only as an adult when I started teaching. I taught in elementary school, high school, and then I taught colleges as well. But in my elementary and high school period was when I was working with students on their science fairs. And then I became a what's called a national, actually in this country as well, a national science fair judge. And so even though I love science fairs today, I think they're so important at letting all kids, regardless of background, zip code, gender, to get access to like doing some fun hands-on stuff. I actually didn't do that as a kiddo, which is interesting.
Now was science cool? Were you and your friends? Was that the cool thing to do?
Absolutely not. Science is not cool. Hey, it ain't even cool today. I mean, I try my best to make it cool, but people are Googling LeBron James and Queen Bee. They're not Googling Bill Nye the Science Guy or Frederic. It's not happening. So science was not cool then, but because I was, all jokes aside, because I was a very athletic kid, I was kind of in the, not so much the cool, but in the coolest kind of athletic. So kids liked me. I just also happened to like science. The other kids who were the true nerds, who had no athletic skills and no game on the court, had no crossover and no fadeaway jump shot, forget it. They were considered nerdy and weird.
I know I've heard you speak, and you have this thing today about how the media needs to do a better job of promoting science people. Scientists today. If you ask who's a scientist, you put up your sign of Dr. Einstein, and then you tease Bill Nye, the science guy. And if you ask me who a scientist is, I'm going to say George Washington Carver is my man.
That's right. That's right.
And that's it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. And let me be clear. George Washington Carver is an amazing scientist. He's an amazing Black scientist, but everybody needs to know him. Einstein, Marie Curie, you mentioned it, but those are all dead, right? And then the challenge is when you try to ask somebody, well, name a living scientist, then they scratch their head. And that's where they may say Bill Nye the Science Guy, or they might say Neil deGrasse Tyson. But that's it. I mean, the average person, and by the way, I'm not knocking this, right? I'm just stating the fact. Yeah. The average person out there, and I want to be clear, Black or white, athletic or non-athletic, musical or not, if you ask them to name a living scientist, they have a tough time. And if you ask them to name 5, they're not going to be able to do it. They just can't do it, right? Mm-hmm. And so my question is, what's that about? I mean, we were talking before the podcast talk, we talked about sports, my love for sports. I'm a huge Patriots, Celtics, Montreal Canadiens, and Red Sox / National fan. I love my sports. I will never hate on an athlete. Go get it. Love it. And so I understand why the media covers that. I also love singing and dancing. I love hip hop. I love jazz. I love you name it. I love reggae. Like, I love artists too. But my problem is, or beef, if you will, is yes, we need to celebrate athletes and entertainers. That's a good thing to do. But scientists are the people that make absolutely everything we do that makes our lives healthy possible. If you use your cell phone, it was not LeBron James that made that happen. If you use navigation, it was not Queen Bee or Jay-Z that made that happen, right? If you use et cetera, you can go to every aspect, the medicines that heal our loved ones, transportation, the cars we drive, they're all created by scientists and engineers who dedicate their lives, Coach Brown, to move the needle forward and give us the best technology and stuff to improve our standard of living. Something like take a shower, turn it on your water. We take that for granted in America. You just got a tap, you turn it on. Well, somebody came up with that. And it wasn't the singer, dancer, rapper, athlete, a politician. It was a scientist. And so my beef is, I'm not suggesting it's going to be the same level of a LeBron James or a Adele or a Rihanna. I get it. I mean, those are famous people making a whole lot of cash. But if we could just show a little bit more love, if the media in general can not just make fun of them and have this, this Big Bang show that, okay, these nerdy, smart geniuses. No, like make science, more engaging, showcase some more scientists, which is why I'm so honored to be on your show that you decided to highlight some of them. Like I said, I love sports and entertainment, but I am a scientist and I appreciate you bringing me on. So that's the beef. It's just not saying it should be the same level, but just show a little more. I mean, as the expression says, put some respect on the scientist's name, man. Like, come on, you can't get through your day without science. It's impossible.
I'm sorry, Dr. B. I apologize.
Right? But don't you agree with me? Put some respect on that person that made your cell phone possible, right? Like, you can't live without a cell phone. At least most of us can't, right? I mean, the food we eat. Some scientists and engineers and agriculture experts made that food possible for us to eat. So,
oh boy, he fired up this morning.
I'm fired up. You got me fired up.
The other thing, the thing I love about you is that all the talk, but you also put it into action. And one thing you did, can you talk about the vision of the free science all-day community days in Philadelphia that you started? And now I attended the one in Columbus, and that one was just awesome. Can you talk about your vision behind that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that's a funny story. So I moved from Philadelphia. You mentioned I was at the Franklin Institute. That's actually the oldest science museum in the United States of America. I moved from there to Columbus to be the president CEO of the Center of Science and Industry, affectionately known as COSI. And for those folks out in Cleveland, this is equivalent to the Great Lakes Science Center, that kind of thing. All right. And so I started January 1, 2017. And my first major interview was with this writer named Mary Yost, who is the writer for Columbus CEO magazine. And that was just the beginning of February, I'm doing this interview. And the interview's going fine. Oh, tell me about the background, all that kind of stuff. And then she says, so, Dr. Bertley, you came from the famous Franklin Institute. What are you going to bring from Philadelphia and bring here to Columbus? So I, being green and naive, open my big mouth and say, oh, we did this thing called the Philadelphia Science Festival. I'm going to bring the Science Festival here to Columbus. Not knowing that your mouth is closed when you're speaking to a reporter, unless you want to make sure they go with it. It's a true story. Cover magazine. I'm in there with my arm stretched out, and it says, Bertley promises to bring Science Festival to Columbus. I tell that story because if you ask people what a science, I mean, you came to it, so you know what it is. But if you ask most people what a science festival is, they have no idea. Everybody knows what a jazz festival is. Everybody knows what a Rit Fest is. Everybody knows what a art festival is, et cetera. You say science festival, people scratch their head. What are you talking about? And so here I'm on the cover of the magazine as a new person to the Ohio region, promising to bring this thing that nobody knows what the heck it is. And by the way, it costs a lot of money to put it on. So I had to fundraise like crazy. But long story short, what it is, the very simple premise is, to your point, it's to make science accessible, right? Like, yes, we have the Ohio State or Carnegie or, the Case Western or whatever. We have all these great universities, right? But you can't walk into those research labs. They're not going to let you in, right? And so how do you make science accessible? So the concept of a science festival, this is not at COSI at our building for the most part. Ours is 4 days long. The first 3 days, we do 100 different events in 20 different communities, including and around Columbus. So we are working with mayors, elected officials to get out in the community and work with their constituents to put on activities there. And our line is, we want to deliver science where you live, where you learn, and you lounge. And Coach Brown, the reason why that's important is if you go to even a COSI, but if you go to The Ohio State or MIT and you walk into a lab and have an experience, which is very hard to do, but let's say you're able to get through and do that, even if you have a cool experience, you don't necessarily think that that's for you. You're like, okay, I got lucky, I got in, but I'm not part of that. But if you do an experiment or an experience in your church, in your community center, in your restaurant, at your favorite rib barbecue joint, where you're really comfortable, you're like, wait a minute, I'm doing something. I'm around my people. I'm in my community. Right. Maybe this is for me. So it's very intentional that we do this massive expose on science, everything from engineering to environmental sciences to agriculture to medicine, you name it. But we showcase it in communities around, in this case, Central Ohio. And those first 3 days, we do 100 events. And then that last day, the fourth day, we call it the Big Science Celebration. And I think that's what you came to. That's actually at COSI, but that's not in our building. It's outside, and we have 200 tents. Google's there, Intel's there. Ohio State has about 10 tents. Audubon has 5, you name it, et cetera. And people come from not just Columbus, but from really far. Honda is there, Battelle. And they're showcasing in ways that you as a visitor, you're not getting a pamphlet from Battelle Research Labs or a pamphlet from Honda, here's our next car. You are interacting with a hands-on experience and really doing something like a scientist or an engineer. And we've had a lot of fun with it. We've done 5 years so far, and people really love it in this community.
It was great. My wife and I attended along with our nephew. He's about 10 years old, and he was just so excited, just to, and I love the hands-on. It wasn't just like you said, hand somebody a pamphlet, here, come check. No, you got to actually do something, and it was awesome. It was awesome. Speaking of that, why are you such an advocate for introducing minority students to careers in STEM?
Yeah. Oh, man. Now you thought I was animated earlier. Now you really got me fired up with that. So there are some fundamental reasons why diversity and equity, if you will, diversity and inclusion is important, well, in general, but especially for the sciences. Mm-hmm. The first reason is, let's just say, you got to do the right thing, right? I mean, if science is the future, if science provides opportunities, you can get a good job with just a 2-year degree from Columbus State in some computer science thing. You might start at $80,000. I mean, that's a legit good job. So just making sure all people, but in the context of America, especially Black and brown folks and girls who are underrepresented, women and differentiated genders, however you want to define that, they need to have access to this too. It can't just be for rich kids or kids who have parents who are scientists or engineers, right? So you want to make sure everybody has access to that. If we want to talk about, raising people out of poverty, providing economic sustainability, talk about filling that workforce pipeline, well, get everybody engaged. So that's one, the right thing to do. But the other thing is, I have this line that I say, genius knows no color, no race, no socioeconomic status, and no zip code, and no gender. What I'm talking about is, you named George Washington Carver. Well, he's African-American. He's a genius. Sure, Einstein's a genius. Sure, Mark Zuckerberg came up with a cool technology, transformed our world with social media. But genius knows no color. If half of this great country, or depending what census, 41% of the United States of America, or 43%, or sometimes 47%, is not white, right? We want to make sure we provide opportunities for half of the country to learn about this, because we might miss the next person who will cure cancer. We might miss that next genius who might come up with the next communication device. We might miss that next person who will come up with the best way of saving our environment from incredible pollution, et cetera, et cetera. If we don't ensure women have opportunities here, women make up 51% of the US population. So forget about even doing the right thing if you're not into supporting different races and other causes. If you're just thinking practically speaking from an American strength and workforce development and the next great genius leaders and technological innovators, if we don't bring in half of the country, we're going to miss out. So those are the two reasons. One, it's the right thing, man. You want everybody to have an opportunity. The third thing I'll say is, again, back to the entertainment thing. And I like to use that only because most of us are into entertainment, whether it's sports or movies and dancing. Hey, I love that stuff. But it is infinitely harder to be Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Lil Wayne, Drake versus, you name him. I mean, it's so, you want to be the next LeBron James. Forget about LeBron James. You want to be the 15th man on the bench? You want to ride pine in the NBA or be in the dugout and never see the field? It is so hard. And I want to be clear, Coach, but I am not saying don't chase your dream. If you're an athlete and you want to be a professional athlete, hey, chase your dream. I'm just saying, let's understand some basic math and probability. It is infinitely harder for you to do that than to be Dr. B, than to get an engineering degree, than to get a PhD, let alone getting a master's or an undergrad where you can feed your family for 30, 40, 50 years. So that's the third piece too, that, again, not poo-pooing on all these other big dreams, but it's actually doable. Just be okay, get through high school, get into a college, pick a discipline. Yeah, it's a little tough here and there, but it's not nearly as hard as playing for the Ohio State Buckeyes, let alone making the Cleveland Browns.
Right. So, yeah. That's good. One thing you said, there are two things, making it accessible. And then the biggest thing you said was it's doable. It's doable.
Absolutely. It's doable, that's so important. You think about all the schools, and I know we have tough K through 12 schools, especially in some urban zip codes. But at the end of the day, there's so many colleges and 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, tech colleges in this great country that, you know what? If you can just get out, you don't have to be a 4.0. If you can just get out and find your way in, you struggle through that. But now you're 22, 24. You have the rest of your life to earn money. And you will have, if you study STEM, you will have a job. That I promise you.
Mm-hmm. Good. I have this thing I talk to young people all the time, adults as well. You can't be what you can't see. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about you doing that whole event. My nephew saw you, and then got a picture with you, and we didn't say that picture, and we're gonna keep, he can keep looking at that picture, and he can say, "I can do this," I you got to see somebody doing it. Nathan Harris is another one I bring with me all the time, guys like that. But
Coach Brown, I got to jump in there, Coach Brown. That's why you are Coach Brown, because you hit the nail on the head. Role models are critical. Right? So you talked about Dr. Nathan Harris. He's another great brother doing some really cool things. Role models are critical. When they see you in that role, oh my gosh, let alone meet you personally. It's like, wait a minute. He's not speaking some Latin-y, highfalutin language. He's dropping bars like an MC. He's about to battle me, but he's talking about science, right? So it's like, I love the fact that you highlighted that, because that's so important.
Yeah. Now let's flip to the fun you have on your YouTube channel, Dr. B and 3, and then the television for QED with Dr. B on PBS. What is it about those shows that you're trying to highlight, or you're trying to do with those?
Yeah, thanks for plugging those two things. So a little background. So the QED with Dr. B is a primetime television show that's 30 minutes long. So it's a TV show. It's what's called a magazine style, where I go around interviewing scientists and engineers from around this country. I think a few of the scientists were outside the country, did that through Zoom. But in general, go around interviewing scientists. So that's a TV show, half hour. The Dr. B in 3 is an animated series, and these are 3-minute short videos. Mm-hmm. So those are two things. But the purpose of both of them is similar. And this is a call out to when we talk about tribe, my tribe, and the tribe I'm talking about now is the scientists and engineer tribes. A lot of times we're arrogant. We have this attitude that we're smarter than everybody else, and we work in these things called the ivory towers of higher education or research labs. We speak in a vocabulary that oftentimes 12 other people around the world understand, and we think that makes us smarter. And that's part of the problem. Yes, on the one hand, we talked about media earlier on this podcast. I wish media would celebrate and elevate scientists and engineers more. But we as scientists and engineers also need to get off our little silver platter, our little podium, and be accessible to the average person, right? Mm-hmm. And so the purpose of those two shows is to one, take important scientific concepts, whether it's climate change, whether it's generative AI and how that's shaking up the world, whatever it is, genetically modified organisms, or just the science of exercise, or the science of stress, whatever these topics are that deal with us, that we deal with every day, is to deconstruct them, but in a way that doesn't make the viewer think that they're small, or pardon the expression, but dumb or stupid. So to deconstruct in a way that still engages the audience, makes the audience feel comfortable, but they actually learn something. And so we do that with the TV show. And then similarly, we do it with the animated series. But the animated series, we've just learned over time that people like animation. And even though it's animated, these aren't for little kids. It's for maybe upper middle school, but really high school, undergrad, and adults, even though it's animated. And those are 3-minute videos where we break down a concept and making it accessible and hopefully enjoyable to the audience. But I want to say this. What I'm so proud about with the team, and let me step back, the TV show with PBS, so that's WOSU PBS. So they own half the rights, we own half the rights. In case of the animated series, that's 100% co-side. We own all those rights because we created the whole thing in-house. And I'm proud about both of these products because, believe it or not, we've won 9 Emmys in 3 years for those shows. And the reason why I'm so proud about that is, sure, having an Emmy trophy is kind of fun. It's a conversation piece when people see it on, behind you. I don't have it right here because I'm actually at home, not at the office. But it's a fun conversation piece. But more important than that, Coach Brown, is Emmys, which recognize the best television kind of in the world, have decided that science communication and science literacy is actually important. And you know what? If someone's doing some good stuff, some good TV or good media around that, we're going to recognize them. And that's why I'm so proud about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, you now we got to get to this shoe game you got going, because I know you're the shoe man and your collection is envied by me and others, Can you talk to the audience about the connection between science and fashion?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, I'm the last of 4 kids, and my dad, being from Trinidad, was who he was, but he was just such a great man, very educated. One of the things is he loved Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, he used to read Shakespeare. Now, you're reading Shakespeare as a kid. I'm like, at the time, I wanted to listen to Run DMC and Kumo D and Grandmaster Flash. Don't push me because I'm close. Like, that's what I listen to. My dad's like, okay, you're going to like that rap thing, but let me also read you some Shakespeare. And so he would read Shakespeare to us. And so I'll never forget it. There's the classic Hamlet. I mean, a lot of us read Hamlet during high school. And I don't know if you remember the story, but he's leaving his home, Denmark, and he's going to France for the first time. And his uncle, this is not Hamlet, actually, it's Laertes, and his uncle Polonius is giving his nephew Laertes this advice. And this is the one, he says all kinds of stuff in this long soliloquy, but he says, it's the same one where he says, and most of all, to thine own self be true, for if thou art true to thyself, thou cannot be false to any man, right? Or a version of that. But in that soliloquy, one of the lines he said is, dress rich, not gaudy. And he says, because the clothes often proclaim the man. And as a kid, I didn't get that. But my dad used to always dress sharp. He had those nice suits back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, cufflinks. He's always a snazzy Western dresser. And he would teach us that, look, it's not about being superficial. People like to use the expression, don't judge a book by its cover. But Coach Brown, that's the biggest BS ever. Because why do you pick up the book or the magazine in the first place? Because the cover looked darn good to you or interesting. It was appealing to you. And so whether you like it or not, fashion is how you choose to present yourself to the world around you. And whether you're talking to somebody about what you're wearing or not, you are having a silent conversation with them, and they're judging you, I'm not saying maliciously or not, but they're making decisions about who you are as a human being based on what you're wearing. And so as I grew into being an adult, I was like, that's what my dad was talking about. That's what Shakespeare was talking about. The clothes often proclaim the man. And so, that got me into fashion. So I love fashion. And for me, fashion isn't about spending $1 billion and having the most expensive sneakers that were just, that are sold, waiting in line for 3 days to get them. But it's about you being comfortable with who you are, deciding how you want to show up in the world and bring your game. So that's one. 2, I do like kicks. I do like sneakers. I have a little bit of a sneaker game. Combination of my 2 things are Jordans and Chuck Taylors. And I have everything from some of the classics. I don't have, for the record, I do not have all the Jordans in the official Jordan collection, but I got a couple of shelves of Jordans at the house. But I also love Chuck Taylors. And so that became a thing where that's my thing that I like having, I like wearing sneakers. And then the third piece to fashion is, while all of that's true, especially in my case as a scientist, I think it's useful. And I don't do it because of this, but I'm conscious of it as I do it. And that's that, I want people to see that, hey, you could be a scientist, but you can still have shoe game. You can still have some cool clothes. You can still be hip or stylish or in vogue or whatever the words are. You can have game in the fashion thing, but still be a neurophysicist, a oncologist, a environmental scientist. You don't have to wear, as we talked earlier, you don't have to have a lab coat with a pocket protector and your calculator sticking out to declare you're a scientist. And so that's why I love fashion. But most importantly, it's an extension of who you are. And whether you like it or not, if you're on that bus going to work or you're walking down that street, people are judging you rightly or wrongly based on how you look. Now, you have to have substance behind that. Right, and hopefully you have some good core values and who you are as a person. But at the end of the day, swagger, people see the swagger on the outside.
Right. The other thing that you've done is you opened up COSI to a lot of events, and you're giving people an opportunity. I've seen some of those events. People are really gotten dressed up to come into COSI. But I think it's twofold. One, you got them in the door so they can come in and see about science, and all that. But also it gives them an opportunity to, to dress up. And then you being the man, if you dressed up, everybody know when they come, they got to come right. Because Doc gonna be, Doc gonna be styling. So you can't come in here clowning that.
That's not hard in our community. Get people to dress up and look good. We like to go out and look good. But I do have to give a special shout out to the board of trustees that hired me. Because, I'm not from Columbus. I'm not from Ohio. They did an international search for the next CEO when I was coming on board. They found me. I went through the process. And then when it became clear that I was a finalist, they said to me, hey, Dr. B, actually, they said Dr. Bertley at the time. Dr. Bertley, clearly you're advancing as one of our candidates, our lead candidates. If we offered you the job, is there anything you'd want to say? And I said, well, I'm honored to be in this position. I'm honored to be a finalist. And hopefully you will offer me the job. But before you offer me the job, I just want to make it clear to you that while I love the history of what I learned about COSI, I've spent a lot of time walking through it. And if you do go with me, I want to make sure that building reflects more of the American diversity and the Columbus diversity. And so if you do go with me, yes, I'm going to make sure we still have, a lot of white moms bringing their kids in there to go to little kid space. But I want to make sure Black folks are in that building, brown folks are in that building, that young folks, but when I say young, between 12 and 22 are also engaged, and that COSI becomes a community asset and not just an asset for a subset of people. And to their credit, they looked at me and they said, Dr. Bertley, that's why you're the perfect person for the job. Mm-hmm. So I want to just give a shout out to them, and you're spot on. I got in there and I was like, look, everybody needs to have access to this. So we cater to all kinds of communities. We got a group called the Center of Societal Inclusion, which is shortened as COSI, but that's where we reach out to the Bhutanese community, the First American community, the Latino community, you name it, the Jewish community, et cetera, and of course the Black and brown community. And so it's been great. So we have one of the biggest events. In fact, it's going to be November, I want to say 18th this year. It's the Excellence Black Tie event, and that's one of the biggest African-American events in the state of Ohio. We will have 3,500 to 4,000 African-American folks from 21 to 70, to your point, Coach Brown, dressed to the nines, and they're going to be rocking and jamming and shucking and jiving, having a great time with science and fantastic entertainment. So yes, we make sure COSI is accessible to everyone.
That's awesome. I once heard you talk about De La Soul. And you said that, and the stakes are high and challenge the next generation in science. Why are you on a mission to get more students interested in science?
Yeah,
why are the stakes so high?
Yeah, and I'm a huge hip hop head. I like new hip hop, but I'm a little old school. I like, some older hip hop. And De La Soul is one of my favorite groups. And one of my favorite albums is that album titled Stakes. They said stakes is high, is how they quote it, but I'm with you. Stakes are high. But it's that concept that for all people, but especially our community, like the stakes are high. If you're not, or your immediate surroundings are not connected to science, technology, engineering, and math, you are going to get left behind. Look at computer science. Look at AI. Look where the job industry and the sector is going. It's all about digital technology. Or look into life sciences. It's all about drug discovery, medicines, etc. I mean, this is all science. Agriculture. Ain't nobody pulling a donkey and planting a seed with a donkey pulling it. That's not happening. This is all computerized technology that's planting all the farms and growing all our produce. It's all around us. And so the stakes are high. I always say, not everybody, including Black and brown or women, not everybody needs to be a PhD scientist. But just like you're supposed to read, right? If you can't read or write and you're illiterate, you're embarrassed about that. Your family's embarrassed for your friends. There's a little shame attached to it. No one expects you to be Maya Angelou or William Shakespeare, but you're still expected to read. Same thing with counting. You don't have to be a mathematical genius, but you're still expected to be able to count and can't figure out your change. Well, in the same way, we should have some vocabulary, some literacy around science. And that's why I say the stakes is high. And that's why all kids, but especially the kids from the more underserved zip codes, the more struggling schools, we need to make sure that they have access to this opportunity to learn about science, technology, engineering, and math.
Good. That's good. I once saw when you gave an example about how we do school, the same way with the desks and all that, and how the hands-on, and I was blessed to walk into a couple schools in Columbus and see that firsthand, the hands-on piece. Yep. And it was just, I think it was some kids were doing some DNA kind of stuff, at East High School. Well, man, you should see how excited those kids were, and it's just, but that's the science piece.
It's a science piece, and the broader, it's the education piece. Outside of the Amish population, right? Most of us don't use a horse and buggy anymore, right? We use planes, trains, and automobiles to get around. When's the last time you communicated with a smoke signal or a cup and string or a telegraph, Coach Brown? You don't. You use these devices, these cell phones, right? When was the last time you unfolded a map? My dad used to take the family on these trips, and he would unfold this map on a steering wheel, and he would try to drive with this floppy map on, and my mother would be upset. She'd be like, "Put away the map, man. You're going to crash us." Right? Well, we don't. Matter of fact, if you show a map to a kid today, they'd look at you like you're crazy. We have this thing called GPS. Technology, medicines, right? I'm into holistic medicine. And so there's a lot of, definitely our ancestors have some good therapies that we need to preserve. But at the end of the day, you're going to a pharmacy and buying something to help you get better. Technology has moved all aspects of our lives forward. We don't hunter and gather. Did you go for a bow and arrow yesterday to get your meal? You either went into your fridge, freezer, or a restaurant, right? Like we've moved, but schools haven't changed, Coach Brown. Right? For the most part, a lot of these public schools where the lion's share of Americans are educated are desks in rows with kids bored out of their minds. So I love the fact that you called out some of these schools where you saw kids doing hands-on stuff, because that's where science is, right? Yeah. Science isn't in a book anymore. Science is at the bench doing discovery, innovating, etc. So we need to just do more of that.
Yeah, that's great. As we come around the corner, let's talk, it's a legacy podcast. We talk about building a lifelong legacy. What would you say, what's the legacy of Dr. Frederic Bertley? Well, what's your legacy? I know it's still building and evolving.
I'm honored that you would even think of me having a legacy at this point. At one point when the history is written and I'm pushing up daisies, maybe might be some legacy. But if I do look in the rearview mirror and say, what do I hope to be part of? And that's one, getting people to be less and less scared or disconnected from science and engineering. It's everywhere on planet Earth. It allows us to do all the things, and you don't have to be an expert. But back to the literacy, just like reading and writing, you should understand some stuff about science and math and engineering. So that's I hope that I made a small dent in getting people comfortable around that. And then two, I hope I make a dent in getting people to appreciate that, just from a daily, weekly, monthly workforce development, lifestyle opportunities, that getting some science or engineering education can open the world to you, and for your listeners, I traveled around the world between 20 and 24 without a dime in my pocket because I learned a couple of skill sets. When I was an undergraduate student, I learned just laboratory skill sets. And so I ended up doing some work for the World Health Organization, living in Haiti, living in the Sudan, living in the Canadian Arctic, just traveling to some really different places. And travel is important because it broadens your mind. But I did that on other people's dime. So it's So if there are two legacies, it's one, hey, science isn't this weird thing that you should be scared of. Jump in, learn, be excited by it. And two, as many people as we provide opportunities to get some scientific training, society will be better because people will get jobs more. People will have the capacity to feed their families, take care of themselves, provide shelter, and have a good lifestyle just by having a little bit of education around science, technology, engineering, math. Beyond that, the biggest legacy point is science is super cool and is for everyone. Period. Amen. Mic drop.
Amen. Amen. We're going to drop the mic on that one now. This brings us to the end of this episode. I want to thank our special guest, Dr. Bertley, for sharing his love for science and bringing a real-life role model for the next generation of future scientists. Dr. Bertley has and continues to build a lifelong legacy in innovative programs to inspire young people, particularly young people of color, to know that science is cool. So thanks, Dr. B, for being on the show.
You got it. And Coach Brown, thanks for having me. And anybody listening to your podcast, if you want to come to COSI for free, shoot me an email at bertley@cosi.org or shoot Coach Brown an email. Say, I heard this guy, Dr. B, on your podcast. How do I get tickets for me and my family or what have you? I will take care of that.
Man, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So I want to thank the audience for joining us during this enlightening and informed discussion on building a lifelong legacy in service. Hope this episode was beneficial to you. As always, thanks for listening. Be a Baller Podcast.
If you enjoy our show, please share this podcast with your family and friends. Be a Baller Podcast is available on all major podcast stations. Be sure to come back next week as we continue to discuss on how to build a lifelong legacy. Until then, don't forget to be a baller. This podcast was created by Coach Tim Brown.